Hi, this is Shayla Lanier for Liberty University History 512, the American Revolution, coming to you to discuss a site of public history. So I have chosen Mount Vernon, even though it is owned by a private nonprofit organization now. It was once the home of George Washington. Originally, when Washington was growing up, it was called the Little Hunting Creek Property. George Washington's brother Lawrence eventually inherited it and built a home and named it Mount Vernon in honor of his respected former military commander. After Lawrence passed away, George leased Mount Vernon from Lawrence's widow, and eventually George somehow became the owner. I left that out of my notes. Let's see. When George Washington married Martha, Mount Vernon was about 9,000 acres, but some was sold off as time went on. He had mounting debts, as most farmers do. George Washington loved Mount Vernon. He said that all he wanted was to enjoy domestic ease under the shadow of my own vine and my own fig tree, with the implements of husbandry around me. Today, Mount Vernon is owned and maintained by the Mount Vernon's Ladies Association of the Union, a private nonprofit organization that was organized in 1853. Have you ever been to a PTA meeting? It's pretty impressive that a voluntary organization can hang together for hundreds of years and be so functional and make such an impact for the rest of us. They say that today Mount Vernon is about 500 acres. It's along the Potomac River. And they say it's owned and maintained in trust for the people of the United States. And Mount Vernon was such an important part of George Washington's life that Mary Higgins Clark, I'm sure you've heard of her, prolific mystery writer, the very first book that she ever wrote, it was a Mount Vernon love story. And she wrote this it was published in 1969 under a different name. It was titled Aspire to the Heavens, which was the family motto of George Washington's mother. And Mary Higgins Clark, it was a student of history, loves history. And so she wrote this Mount Vernon love story. She decided to write it as she was researching George Washington's life. And she found him to be very engaging, and that he was giant in every way, not only his physical height, but his personality, his presence. And she said that he was also a master horseman, which is why the Indians gave him their highest compliment. He rides like his horse, like an Indian. She also dispels the myth that George Washington was really in love with Sally Fairfax. And she says that Martha Washington was known as Patsy, and that George always called her my dearest Patsy, and that he wore a locket with her picture around his neck. And so it's kind of a sweet story. Obviously, it's a fictionalized version of their love story, but I thought that was interesting and I wanted to share. I also used this book, The Real George Washington. And it has a lot of really interesting information and facts. It's, of course, has better citing than Mary Higgins Clark, who doesn't use any citing because she was writing a novel. I also found a quote in this book, which doesn't have anything to do with Mount Vernon, but it's by Mark Levin's father, Jack Levin. And it's about Washington's crossing of the Delaware at Trenton. But in the introduction, he has a quote by Abraham Lincoln. And Lincoln says, I remember all the accounts given of battlefields and struggles for the liberties of the country, and none fix themselves upon my imagination so deeply as the struggle here at Trenton. He says, I recollect thinking then, even as a boy, that there must have been something more than common that those men struggled for. So obviously George Washington's had a deep impact on the formation of our country, his humility with resigning his commission and not running away with the presidency and not being, made king, set a great example and precedent for everybody. And Mount Vernon is a valuable public history site, and it said that it is the most visited of the nation's historic sites. So hopefully we can all get there someday. Thank you.